The bank fraud alert dinged on my phone at 6:47 a.m. Someone had just tried to wire $127,000 from my savings account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. According to the notification, the transaction had originated from my home IP address, but I was the only one home. Or so I thought. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through my bedroom door, I could hear the faint sound of my office door clicking shut downstairs. Footsteps on the hardwood floor, trying to be quiet. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and pulled up the security camera app I'd installed 3 weeks ago. The app that only I knew about, the app that had been recording everything. The footage showed my nephew Jason in my home office at 6:43 a.m., sitting at my desk with my laptop open, typing rapidly. On the screen, I could see my bank's wire transfer page, my financial files spread across the desk. And in his hand, a small device I recognized from my years as a bank manager. A signature pad used for forging electronic signatures. I wasn't calling 911. I was calling my attorney, Linda Chen, who I'd asked to be on standby for exactly this moment, and the FBI agent I'd been working with for the past 2 weeks, because my nephew wasn't just stealing from me. He was running a sophisticated identity theft operation, and I was about to help bring it all crashing down. My name is Patricia Morrison. People call me Patty. I'm 68 years old, and I spent 43 years working my way up from bank teller to branch manager at First National Bank of Colorado before retiring 4 years ago. My husband Robert died of pancreatic cancer 6 years back. We'd bought our 4-bedroom house in Lakewood, a suburb of Denver, in 1988 for $87,000. Today it's worth $550,000. We'd been smart with money, invested wisely, and I had a comfortable retirement, a pension, Social Security, and about $340,000 in savings and investments. Enough to live well without worry. I had no children of my own, but I'd always been close to my younger brother Michael's son, Jason. Michael and his wife died in a car accident when Jason was 15. I'd helped raise that boy, paid for his college, co-signed his first apartment. He'd always been brilliant with computers, charismatic, ambitious. When he told me he was starting a tech company 5 years ago, I believed in him. I'd even invested $50,000 in his startup. The startup failed, as did the next one, and the one after that. But Jason always had another big idea, another opportunity just around the corner. He was 32 now, still living in a rented apartment in downtown Denver, still chasing the next big thing. 8 months ago, Jason called me in tears. His apartment building was being sold and converted to condos. He had 60 days to move out, but he'd spent all his money on his latest venture, a cryptocurrency trading platform that had just collapsed. He had nowhere to go. Could he stay with me? Just temporarily, just until he got back on his feet. Maybe 3 months, tops. I said yes. Of course I said yes. Jason was family. He was the closest thing to a son I'd ever have. The house had 3 empty bedrooms. I had the space. He moved in that weekend with his computers, his gaming setup, and boxes of equipment I didn't understand. He took over the guest room and quickly expanded into my late husband's old den, turning it into what he called his command center. Multiple monitors, servers humming day and night, equipment that made my electricity bill jump by $200 a month. The first month was fine. Jason was respectful, quiet, working on his next project. He said he was consulting for tech companies remotely, helping them with cybersecurity. He'd show me screenshots of invoices, talk about his clients. It sounded legitimate. He even paid me $500 toward utilities, which I hadn't asked for but appreciated. The second month, things started feeling off. Jason began asking strange questions about my finances. Had I thought about setting up a trust? Did I have a will? Who was my power of attorney? At my age, I should really have someone who could handle my affairs if something happened. I told him I had everything arranged with my attorney. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Disappointment? Frustration? That week, I noticed my mail had been opened. A bank statement I hadn't gotten to yet was sitting on the kitchen counter, clearly unsealed and then carefully resealed. When I asked Jason about it, he said it had been delivered that way, must have been the mail carrier. But I'd been getting mail from that same carrier for 12 years. She was meticulous. I started watching more carefully. Jason's work hours were odd. He'd sleep until noon, then work from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. He said it was because his clients were overseas, different time zones. But I'd wake up sometimes at 3 a.m. to use the bathroom and hear him downstairs, not on work calls but on personal calls. Laughing with friends about his setup, about how he was positioning himself perfectly. One night, about 3 months ago, I couldn't sleep. I came downstairs for some warm milk and heard Jason in the den with the door cracked. He was on a video call, his face illuminated by his monitors. "Dude, I'm telling you, this is the easiest score I've ever set up." His voice was low but excited. "She's got over $500,000 in liquid assets, plus the house, no kids, no husband. I'm literally her only family." I froze in the hallway, my hand on the banister. The beauty is, she trusts me completely. Helped raise me, paid for college, all that emotional investment. She'd never suspect. I've already got access to her laptop password. I've been slowly making copies of her documents. IDs, social security card, bank statements, investment accounts. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my lungs. The voice on the other end said something I couldn't hear. Jason laughed. "Nah, I'm not going to wait for her to die. That could be another 20 years. I'm going to move faster, convince her she needs to move to assisted living, sell the house while she's confused about the process. Make it look like she's making these decisions herself. With the deepfake tech I've been developing, I can literally make her voice approve anything. I've already got hours of her speech patterns recorded." The person on the call said something else. Jason nodded. "The mortgage refinance goes through next week. She has no idea I applied for it in her name. That's another $200K in my pocket. By the time she figures out what's happening, if she even does, I'll be in Singapore with a new identity. She's old, dude. Even if she tries to report it, who's going to believe her over me? I'm her beloved nephew. I'll just say she's getting dementia, getting confused." I backed away silently, went to my room, and locked the door. I sat on my bed shaking for 20 minutes. Then I did what any retired bank manager who dealt with fraud for 4 decades would do. I called my attorney. Linda Chen had handled Robert's estate and my retirement paperwork. She was sharp, no nonsense, and specialized in elder law and fraud cases. When I told her what I'd heard, she was quiet for a long moment. "Patty, this is serious. This isn't just theft. This is identity theft, wire fraud, potentially elder abuse. If he's using deepfake technology to forge your voice on financial documents, that's federal. We need to involve law enforcement." "But he's my nephew. He's Michael's son." "Michael would want you to protect yourself. This man is a criminal, Patty. He's planned this. Do you understand what he said? He's going to drain your accounts and leave you with nothing. And he's counting on you being too scared or too confused to stop him." That was 3 months ago. Linda had connected me with FBI Special Agent Marcus Webb, who worked in the Cybercrimes Division. Together, we'd built a case. First, I changed all my passwords using a secure password manager, but I left my old laptop with the compromised password as bait. I bought a new laptop that Jason didn't know about and conducted all my real business on that. Second, I installed security cameras throughout my house. Not obvious ones, but tiny cameras hidden in smoke detectors, picture frames, even a fake plant in my office. Everything was cloud recorded, accessible only to me, Linda, and Agent Webb. Third, I started documenting everything, every conversation with Jason, every time I caught him in my office, every strange phone call, every time he asked about my finances. Fourth, I worked with my bank to flag any unusual activity. That's how I got the alert this morning about the wire transfer attempt. And fifth, I played along. When Jason asked about my will, I pretended to be confused. When he suggested I tour some assisted living facilities, I acted like maybe that wasn't such a bad idea. When he offered to help me organize my financial documents, I thanked him and said how lucky I was to have him. I watched him watching me, and I knew he thought he was winning. The mortgage refinance he mentioned? It never went through because my bank flagged it as suspicious and called me directly. But I didn't tell Jason that. I let him think it had worked. Instead, I worked with Agent Webb to trace Jason's activities. We discovered he'd been running this scam before. 3 years ago, in Phoenix, He'd lived with an elderly woman who'd been his girlfriend's grandmother. She'd lost $180,000 before her son noticed and reported it. Jason had disappeared before police could arrest him. The case was still open. We also found he'd opened 7 credit cards in my name, charged $43,000, applied for loans, created fake email accounts pretending to be me. The deep fake voice technology he'd mentioned, he'd been testing it, making fake recordings of me approving financial transactions. Agent Webb had been gathering evidence for 2 months. We had enough to arrest Jason 10 different ways, but Webb wanted more. He wanted Jason's network, his accomplices, the people buying the deep fake technology he was developing. "Give him rope," Webb had said at our last meeting. "Let him think he's about to succeed. Then we catch him in the act with witnesses, with documentation, with everything. We make a case so airtight he can't weasel out of it. So we set a trap. I let Jason believe that I'd agreed to move to Sunset Gardens, an assisted living facility he'd been pushing. I signed the papers he put in front of me, papers that I knew Linda had already flagged with the facility as fraudulent. I played the confused old woman. Jason had arranged to sell my house. He'd forged my signature on a listing agreement. He'd found a buyer willing to do a quick cash sale, close in 2 weeks. The closing was scheduled for today, 10 a.m., at Mountain West Title Company. I'd seen the documents. Jason was selling my house for $485,000, well below market value, to a shell company. He'd be pocketing the entire amount. The deed he'd forged had my signature, notarized by someone I'd never met, on a date I could prove I was in Albuquerque visiting my college roommate. The wire transfer attempt this morning was him getting greedy, trying to grab my savings before the house sale closed. He didn't know the bank had already frozen the account at my request. I got dressed quickly, in the navy blazer and slacks I'd laid out the night before. Professional, composed. I looked like the bank manager I'd been for 4 decades. I texted Linda. "He tried the wire transfer. I'm ready." Her response, "Webb is already en route. See you at 9:45 a.m. outside the title company. Do not tell Jason where you're going." I came downstairs at 7:30. Jason was in the kitchen, making coffee, acting normal. His laptop was closed. He smiled at me, that charming smile that had fooled me for months. "Morning, Aunt Patty." "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep. Lot on my mind with the move and everything." He stepped closer, put his hand on my shoulder. "I know it's a big change, but you're making the right decision. Sunset Gardens is going to be perfect for you. You'll have people around, activities, medical care right there. You won't have to worry about this big house anymore. The house my husband and I had built a life in. The house where I'd hosted Christmases and birthday parties and Jason's own graduation celebration." "When do I need to be out?" I asked, playing my part. "The closing is today at 10. The new owners want to move in right away, so I've arranged for movers to come on Friday. They'll pack everything, put it in storage, and you can decide what you want to keep for your new apartment." "That's very thoughtful of you." He smiled. "You've done so much for me, Aunt Patty. I'm just trying to take care of you now." I excused myself, said I had a doctor's appointment at 9. Jason didn't ask questions. Why would he? He thought I was a confused old woman who'd bought his story. I drove to the title company in my Honda CR-V, the one I'd owned for 11 years. I parked a block away at 9:42 a.m. Linda's silver Mercedes was already there. She got out when she saw me, along with Agent Webb and 2 other people I didn't recognize. "Patty," Linda said, taking my hands. "Are you ready? Is he really going to show up?" Agent Webb nodded. "His accomplice is already inside, the supposed buyer. We've had eyes on the title company since 8 a.m. Jason's playing this out to the end." One of the people I didn't recognize stepped forward. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm Detective Sarah Yoon with Denver PD, Elder Abuse Unit. I've been working with Agent Webb. I want you to know you're incredibly brave." "I don't feel brave. I feel sick." "That boy is my nephew. That man," Agent Webb corrected gently, "is a criminal who's been running this scam for years. You're not his first victim, and if we don't stop him today, you won't be his last." At 9:58 a.m., Jason's Tesla pulled into the parking lot. He got out wearing a suit I recognized, one I'd bought him for his college graduation. He walked into the title company like he owned the place. We waited 2 minutes. Then we went in. The title company's conference room had a long table. Jason sat on one side with a man I'd never seen before, supposedly the buyer. A title officer sat at the head of the table with a stack of papers. Jason was signing documents, laughing, confident. He looked up when the door opened, saw me, saw Linda, saw Agent Webb with his badge out, saw the 2 uniformed police officers behind us. The color drained from his face. "Aunt Patty? What are you doing here? I told you I'd handle the closing." "Jason Michael Patterson," Agent Webb said formally. "I'm Special Agent Marcus Webb with the FBI. You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and elder abuse." "What? This is insane. Aunt Patty, tell them. Tell them you asked me to help you sell the house." I walked to the table and picked up the forged deed. My signature, perfect, except I'd never signed it. "I never asked you to sell my house, Jason. I never agreed to move to Sunset Gardens. I never authorized any wire transfers, credit cards, or loans." My voice was steady. "And I certainly never gave you permission to steal my identity and use deepfake technology to forge my voice on financial documents." "You're confused. You're not thinking clearly. This is exactly why we need to get you into care." "I'm not confused." I cut him off. "I'm a retired bank manager who spent 43 years dealing with fraud. I know exactly what you did. I have security camera footage of you in my office. I have recordings of your phone calls discussing your plan. I have forensic evidence of the deep-fake voice files you created. I have documentation of every forged signature, every fraudulent account, every lie." Jason turned to the man beside him. "Mark, tell them about our deal." The man, Mark, held up his hands. "I don't know what he's talking about. I answered an ad for a house. I never met this guy before today." Mark, it turned out, was actually Detective Frank Torres, another Denver PD officer working undercover. Jason stood up, knocking his chair back. "You set me up. You lying." "Sit down, Mr. Patterson," Agent Webb said. "You have the right to remain silent." As Webb read Jason his Miranda rights, I watched my nephew's face cycle through emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally, desperation. "Aunt Patty, please. I'm family. I'm Uncle Michael's son. You helped raise me. You can't do this to me." That's when I felt Linda's hand on my arm, steadying me. "You used that," I said quietly. "You used the fact that I loved you, that I loved your father. You counted on me being too loyal, too trusting, too old to fight back. You were wrong." The FBI found $127,000 in cryptocurrency in Jason's accounts, money he'd stolen from me and 2 other victims. They found the deepfake software on his computers, voice samples of 3 different elderly women. They found detailed plans for moving to Singapore, a fake passport, and a network of accomplices who'd been helping him run identity theft schemes across 4 states. Jason was charged with 14 federal counts and 6 state charges. The evidence was overwhelming. His public defender advised him to take a plea deal. He's serving 8 years in federal prison. The aftermath was harder than I expected. I'd done the right thing. I knew that intellectually. But emotionally, I'd put my nephew in prison. Michael's son. The boy I'd helped raise. I went to therapy. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, who specialized in trauma from family betrayal, helped me work through the guilt and grief. Because it was grief. I was grieving the person I'd thought Jason was, grieving the relationship I'd thought we had. "You didn't put him in prison," Dr. Okonkwo told me in one session. "He put himself there through his choices. You just refused to be his victim." I had the house locks changed. I had my credit frozen and spent months working with the credit bureaus to undo the damage Jason had done. Linda helped me file victim impact statements for Jason's sentencing. I recovered about $90,000 of what he'd stolen, though the rest was gone, spent on his lifestyle. The thing that kept me up at night was knowing there was a woman in Seattle. Jason had mentioned her in one of his calls, another potential target. An elderly widow with substantial assets whose nephew was supposedly moving in to help her. I found her. It took me 3 weeks of searching public records, cross-referencing Jason's known associates, but I found her. Margaret Hanson, 71, Bellevue, Washington. I called her. She hung up on me. I called again. She blocked my number, so I drove to Seattle. Showed up at her door with a binder full of evidence. Police reports, court documents, photos of Jason. "Your nephew is not who he says he is," I told her through her locked screen door, "and I have proof." She called the police on me. But when the Seattle officer arrived and saw my documentation, he asked Margaret to let us in. We sat at her kitchen table for 3 hours. I showed her everything. She cried. Then she got angry. Then she called her attorney. Her nephew was arrested 2 days later trying to board a flight to Vancouver. He had $87,000 in cash and a fake passport. Margaret had been days away from signing over her house. I'm 68 years old. I live alone in my 4-bedroom house in Lakewood. I've installed a state-of-the-art security system. I'm careful about who I trust, but I'm not closed off. I volunteer at the senior center now, teaching financial literacy and fraud prevention. I share my story. I warn people about the signs I missed, the red flags I ignored because of family loyalty. Last month, I got a letter from Jason. A long, rambling apology from prison. How sorry he was, how he'd been desperate, how he'd made mistakes, how he hoped someday I could forgive him. I haven't written back. Maybe someday I will. But not now, Dr. Okonkwo says I need to forgive for myself, not for him, and I'm working on that. Some days are easier than others. What I want people to know, especially people my age, is that family can betray you. The people you trust most can be the ones who hurt you worst, and that's not your fault. Trusting isn't weakness. Love isn't foolishness. But protecting yourself isn't betrayal either. I think about Michael sometimes, my brother who died too young. I wonder what he'd think about what his son became, what I had to do. I like to think he'd understand, that he'd be proud I stood up for myself, that he'd be horrified by what Jason had planned. My attorney Linda has become a friend. We have lunch once a month. Agent Webb sends me updates on elder fraud cases, asks my input sometimes on financial aspects since I understand banking. I'm part of a task force now, retired professionals helping law enforcement understand sophisticated fraud schemes. I'm dating, casually. Harold, a widower I met at the senior center. He's 72, retired engineer, kind eyes, gentle sense of humor. We take things slow. He knows my story. He thinks I'm brave. I think I'm just stubborn. The house feels like mine again. I've redecorated the guest room, turned the den back into a reading room like Robert and I had it. I sit there sometimes with a book and a cup of tea, and I feel peaceful. I'm not angry anymore, most days. I'm grateful. Grateful I had the skills to recognize the fraud. Grateful I had the resources to fight back. Grateful for Linda and Agent Webb and Dr. Okonkwo. Grateful that I trusted my instincts even when it meant turning in someone I loved. And I'm proud. Proud that I didn't let fear or guilt or family obligation turn me into a victim. Proud that I helped stop Jason before he hurt more people. Proud that I saved Margaret in Seattle. My name is Patricia Morrison. I'm 68 years old. I'm a retired bank manager, a fraud prevention advocate, and a survivor. My nephew tried to steal my life savings, my home, and my identity, but he couldn't steal my strength. And he couldn't steal my future. That wire transfer alert that came through at 6:47 a.m. 3 months ago? It was the beginning of the end for Jason, and the beginning of the rest of my life. A life where I know my worth, I trust my judgment, and I refuse to be anyone's mark. If you're reading this or hearing my story, and something feels wrong in your own life, trust that feeling. Document everything. Get help from professionals. Don't let family loyalty or fear or shame keep you silent. You're never too old to fight for yourself. You're never too old to demand respect, and you're never too old to start over. I'm living proof of that.